Welcome to the Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church on Zoom. My name is Jan Mabey, and I am your worship associate today. I am joined by Beth Syverson, our Director of Music Ministries, in welcoming you this morning. We are delighted to have our musical guests today, members of the Orange Coast Choir, Barbara Schilling on harp, and Taylor Cox, a student of Beth Syverson's, singing and playing a song that she composed. Rev Judy, our Director of Religious Education, already held classes for the children earlier this morning, and she will offer one for our youth after the service. Our minister, Reverend Sean Wilshire, is on sabbatical and has a message for us.
Welcome to Orange Coast Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Reverend Sean Wilshire, and I am so happy that you're here. But I am also really sad that I'm not there to meet you in person, at least not right now. There are two things that I would like you to know. First of all, we have planned a wonderful worship service for you. We work very hard, whether I'm in the pulpit or not, that you get something that is inspiring, that lifts you up, that gives you hope. And I hope that you find that here. The second thing I want you to know is that you are surrounded by some of the most wonderful people that you are ever going to meet. And okay, I'm a little bit biased, but truly they're wonderful people. So I invite you to reach out to them, as I know that they will also reach out to you. So enjoy the service, and I look forward to meeting you.
Our guest speaker is Reverend Dr. Karen Stoyanoff, who served as minister of the Orange Coast UU Church for 13 years. When she completed her ministry here, she moved to the UU Church in Anaheim, where she spent more than 8 years before retiring from parish ministry to devote her time and effort to the larger community. Currently, Reverend Karen serves on the Orange County Human Relations Foundation Board, the Orange County Interfaith Network Board, the Sheriff's Interfaith Advisory Committee, and the UU Justice Ministry California Board. She's an active member of CLUE and United to End Homelessness Faith Leaders Council. She also is a chief chauffeur for her two grandchildren, Luke and Nicole. Next year marks the 25th anniversary of her graduation from Meadville Lombard Theological School and her ordination. In her spare time, she loves to bake, to play with her 3 dogs, and read murder mysteries. I would like to invite you to open the chat box and, if you haven't already, say hello this morning. We'll be turning the chat off during the sermon portion of the service so as not to distract, but we will turn it on right afterwards. As Unitarian Universalists, we have many different beliefs, but we are one loving community. We are bound together not by a common set of rules or beliefs, but rather a covenant. A covenant is simply a promise that whatever our beliefs, we accept one another and encourage each other in spiritual growth. We affirm that all life has inherent value and that all existence is interconnected. We strive for justice and compassion in our deeds and relationships, and we are committed to creating a welcoming community without regard to the traits that sometimes divide people. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors. If you're seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you will find it here. After the service, we will be placing everyone who remains into Zoom breakout rooms for 20 minutes of coffee and conversation. Everyone is welcome to join in, and it's a great way to get to know people in the congregation. Our worship begins with the lighting of our chalice, the symbol of the Unitarian Universalist tradition. As we light it, we say our unison affirmation. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, we can light them together. Please join me now as we begin. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another, this we affirm together.
Good morning, everyone. Please join Good morning. I want to tell you how happy I am to be with you today, to see so many names I recognize in the list of participants and to see a lot of names that are new to me, but it's good to see all of you. For our call to worship this morning, I've written some words I think might be appropriate. Today, as every day, we are at the forming edge of a new world, and there is much to be done. Right here, there is the bed to be made and the breakfast dishes in the sink. And out there, the larger world is crying out to us. Some need our comfort, others need our help just to make it through. There are decisions to be made. Justice calls out for aid. Today is every day. We are at the forming edge. The choice is up to each of us as to how and what we will answer. Perhaps we can do it all, but if not, leave the dishes in the sink.
Hearts open, minds awake, change us now for heaven's sake. Leave us not alone in hatred's wake. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love. shocked awake, much to learn from our mistakes, draw us closer in our heartache. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love.
Our reading today is Fault Line by Reverend Robert Walsh. Did you ever think there might be a fault line passing underneath your living room? A place in which your life is lived in meeting and in separating, wandering and telling, unaware that just beneath you is the unseen seam of great plates that strain through time, and that your life, already spilling over the brim, could be invaded, sent off in a new direction, turned aside by forces you were warned about but not prepared for. Shelves could be spilled out, the level floor set at an angle in some seconds shaking. You would have to take your losses, do whatever must be done next. When the great plates slip and the earth shivers, and the flaw is seen to lie in what you trusted most, look not to more solidity, to weighty slabs of concrete poured, or strength of cantilevered beam to save the fractured order. Trust more the tensile strands of love that bend and stretch you to hold you in the web of life that's often torn but always healing. There's your strength. The shifting plates, the resistive earth, your room, your precious life, they all proceed from love, the ground on which we walk together. Let's take a collective breath as we close our eyes in a moment of silence.
Love once again.
We've been having a tough winter and spring, haven't we? We're living through multiple powerful issues, and I know it's hard. Sometimes for me, it's exhausting just making it through the pandemic, the political mess, and the violence, which seems pervasive. And I know I'm not alone with the frustration, my own anger, and the uncertainty that sometimes feels overwhelming. So in a way, I feel a little apologetic asking you to do something more than you already are. But in spite of the various dangers that beset us right now, I am going to suggest we also need to find a way, new ways, to make a positive difference. And even though it seems like there are constant reminders of how bad things are, every so often, something comes along that shows me new ways to make sure my own contribution is building up rather than tearing down, is contributing to the solution, not the problem. One such instance occurred not long ago. It was the day after the news carried the story of the Republican president stopping traffic, using the Secret Service to clear away protesters, peaceful protesters, so he could walk from the White House to a nearby Episcopal church while carrying a Bible. Tear gas and flash grenades were involved in clearing away the protesters. And all of this was so that there could be a picture of him in front of the church holding a Bible, a photo op. I'm sure I don't have to remind you of the great outrage that followed this event. That next day, while I was driving, I had CNN radio on, and they were interviewing Reverend Marianne Budd, Episcopal Bishop of Washington. She suggested all of us might think, what would Jesus do when deciding on a course of action? And then she immediately amended it to say, what would love do? I was so entranced with that idea that I don't remember what else she said. My first thought was, I could use that. Now, personally, I don't have any problem with what would Jesus do, since I believe he was a great teacher and in his life exhibited many instances of choosing to support the downtrodden, the oppressed, the outcasts. However, as a Unitarian Universalist minister, I don't think the phrase is truly illustrative of our faith. My assumption is that if I'd called this talk, What Would Jesus Do?, some of you might have decided you didn't want to hear that sermon. I know that also some of you would have loved the sermon with that title. But for me, it would have had limitations. What would love do, on the other hand, has theological implications that pretty much parallel our principles and our values. It's more inclusive and allows us to consider what would Buddha do? What would Mohammed do? What would Zoroaster do? And other great teachers. Among them might well be, what would Martin do? Or what would Abe do? As well as strictly religious figures. And to top it off, I'm far from the only UU minister who claims that love is what undergirds everything else in our faith. So lucky me, I had my next sermon waiting for my next opportunity to preach. I decided that the first thing I needed to do was to be very clear about the meaning of the word love as I was using it in this phrase. My dictionary tells me that love is warm attachment, enthusiasm or devotion, unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of another, parental concern for humankind, individual concern for others, and even holding one's opponent scoreless in tennis. For our purposes today, you can ignore that last one. The other thought that occurred to me almost immediately was that all the world's great religions have some form of love your neighbor in their teachings. It certainly is implied in our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Our second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Our sixth principle, world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And our seventh principle, the inherent, I'm sorry, the respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. None of those principles can be lived out without a strong commitment to love, one that encompasses all our efforts of outreach and our responses to others. I think a decision to consider what would love do throughout our day, week, and year would lead to a much better world, but it is an enormous task. So we have to start by asking, what does that mean for my life? And not just in the midst of the big, all-important work of justice, but also in my daily actions and reactions. It even includes, what do we do when our neighbor doesn't curb the dandelions and they spread to my lawn? Although I'm more apt to be the perpetrator on that one. Or what happens when someone is being obnoxious, in our view, by demanding that their opinion is the only right one? And it even counts when a teenager is being a total brat, because that is what teenagers do. Even the very best one is a total brat part of the time. It's what they're supposed to do to complete the developmental tasks of adolescence. Well, it's not so much what they are supposed to do as they don't always know how to complete the task of individuation without being a total brat. But hopefully, they're learning a better way to react in adulthood. And if you don't have a teenager in your life to consider, remember what you were like as a teenager. I know I was a pretty good kid, actually, a goody two-shoes. But I also know I was a total brat on occasion, culminating in a moment when I was 17 and thoroughly disgusted by something my mother did, and I completely lost it. I actually said to her, "You've ruined my life for 17 years, and I'm really glad that I only have to deal with it for another 6 months." Even as those words came out of my mouth way back then, I knew I was way over the line. And you need to know that my parents never ruined my life, even when I thought they were being too harsh or unfair. I was not an abused child. I was also fortunate that in that moment, my mother did do what love would do and just let it go. I certainly tried to keep that stricture in mind when my own kids were teenagers, although I suppose they would each tell you that I sometimes failed. It's much easier with grandchildren. We get to spoil them. And even though what would love do is a good maxim for dealing with the minutiae of everyday life, and many of us practice it at least some of the time, it isn't easy. Still, it seems to be most difficult in the larger world about the bigger problems and issues. And it's no less important for us to find the strength and courage to ask ourselves, what would love do in those cases? Unfortunately, living our Unitarian Universalist principles and values was never meant to be easy. It's just meant to be what we do. No matter where you come down on values, political action, economic theory, or a host of other societal issues, all of us, every last one of us, is occasionally thrust into situations where we are at loggerheads with others in the picture. When we are with like-minded people, we can feel affirmed for our point of view, which is very comforting. But it doesn't help us on those occasions when we must deal with others, often those in authority, who see things differently. And that's much less comforting. And it's always tempting to look for those who think like we do and choose up sides to criticize or castigate those who think and act differently. But I want to be part of the larger world. And so that means I will inevitably end up in company with people with whom I don't agree. And sometimes that's on major issues, things that matter greatly to me. I know without any doubt that they matter greatly to those who think differently as well. And they are as mutually opposed points of view or actions. And if that's true, we can't both be right. So what would love do? I don't get to only ask that question when it's easy. I have to ask it when it's scary, maybe really dangerous, and extremely difficult. And I would much rather not need to do that. But the culture of hatred and violence that currently exists in our world is too destructive for love to just stand by, or worse yet, to walk away. There has to be a way for love to act, even when both of us, or all of us, can't have our way. And I believe there is. Remember, in the most well-known passage about love, 1 Corinthians in the Christian Bible, love does not insist on its own way. It also is not arrogant or rude. And that's just me cherry picking. Love actually includes quite a few additional elements. So how do I speak truth to power? How do I maintain my truth in the face of serious disagreement without being rude or arrogant, without demanding my own way? It can be done. And in a minute, I will give you an illustration. It requires that I truly be respectful of that other person, sometimes whether or not they are respectful of me, and certainly whether or not we agree. It demands that I cut them some slack and don't assume that they are thinking a certain way or guilty of some specific wrongdoing. It requires that I be willing to forgive unintentional hurts. Although I think it also demands that I share that feeling with the other person, respectfully and lovingly. And it demands that I listen with an open heart and stay in the conversation. None of that is easy or comfortable. None of it is without risk. But done well, it leads to a better place. Probably one where neither one gets everything, but definitely one that improves the situation. So let me tell you about 2 meetings I've been in recently. I'll tell you about the loving one first. The group of people involved were predominantly white, but with several persons of color, varying faiths and life situations. 2 of the African Americans were asked to tell us their thoughts about the murder of George Floyd. They shared deeply personal reactions and stories and pointed out that a major factor in the situation from their point of view was white privilege. They spoke truth, and I'm happy to say those of us who were white didn't exert power over them. We listened, painful though it was. One of them pointed out that it isn't the job of persons of color to teach white people about privilege. We need to take responsibility for that ourselves. But that point was made in a very loving way. It made it easy for me to say, I know it isn't your job, but thank you for sharing your stories with us. They are deeply touching and move me in ways that haven't happened in my own life. I deeply appreciate your willingness to share, even though it isn't your responsibility to do that for me. I believe that in that instance, everyone there was speaking and acting out of love, and that it was a very meaningful time where we could come together across very different life experiences. I've been doing a lot of reading about anti-racism and white privilege lately. I contrast that with another meeting I attended within a week, including some of the same people, but it was a much larger group. We were all asked what impact the shooting of George Floyd had on each of us, and then what we thought the group assembled should do as a response. Thinking about the meeting the week before, I offered that we needed to provide places and opportunities for people to share their stories and to listen lovingly to others, that it was important to make certain people had a chance to express themselves and to hear differing points of view. It was something we could do, which of course I knew, having been part of it just a few days before. This group was split into two different ways to proceed. There were some who agreed with what I had suggested and were interested in moving to bring people together. But there was also a significant group, I think actually more than half of those present, who wanted to call out those in authority on their conduct, accuse them of malfeasance, and demand that they do things the way that group believed. Now, I don't think there was serious inappropriate behavior on the part of those being accused, although I didn't like all the choices they made. There was a clear air of hostility coming from the second group at the meeting, and it often sounded like, if you don't do it my way, you should be punished, rather than a dialogue allowing all of us to understand what was going on and to respectfully agree or disagree. Several people even said, I will quit the group if I don't get what I want. So my final point about this is, what would love do when it doesn't get its way? It will happen, no matter which way you are talking about, which position you are coming from. None of us always gets our way. To go back for a moment to a more personal example, neither the teenager nor the parent always gets their way. But hopefully, we outgrow the teenage drama over things, and hopefully, we keep the door open. I don't believe we can solve a problem if we won't talk to the other side. And that requires listening, not just telling someone else the way it should be. Even though sometimes we have to keep working to make our truth come to life rather than let it go, we can and should stay in relationship with those who disagree. One of my favorite people at that meeting, a man of color, said, sometimes I have to stay with and fight for my people. I can't go along with you, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. I heard that as saying, we can still work together on other things. I am so glad I live in a society where I'm not the only one who's willing to stay at the table. I'm so glad that there are people who are willing to listen respectfully to me, even, especially when they don't think I am right. I'm so glad that there are people who are willing to lovingly invite me to consider their point of view without telling me I must see the light as they do. And some of those people are interested in staying in dialogue, relationship, even when we have reached a stalemate. Go back and look at our principles again. I can make a case that every single one of them asks us to start from a position of love and to ask, what would love do before we respond to anything? This is what Unitarian Universalism asks us to do. It's a big task, one that probably can't be universally followed. It's aspirational. And when we fail, as we will, we can ask for forgiveness. And that includes from ourselves as well as from others. What I do know is that it is a task that does not invite or include violence, whether in word or deed, but it is a task that is worthy of aspiring to.
I'd like you to join me on this song. We've sung it before. We've sang it at the interfaith service a couple of months ago. It's a really wonderful song. There's a couple of verses which you might not know so well, but I encourage you to join me on the chorus. To be humble, to be kind, it is a giving of the peace in your mind. To a stranger, to a friend, to give in such a way that has no end. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. And to be bold, to be brave, it is the thinking that the heart can still be saved, and the darkness can come quick. The danger's in the anger and in the hanging on to it. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. Tell me what it is that you see, a world that's full of endless possibilities, and heroes don't look like they used to, they look like you do. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. Last time. We are love, we are one, we are how we treat each other when the day is done. We are peace, we are war, we are how we treat each other and nothing more. We are how we treat each other and nothing more. We are how we treat each other.
Unitarian Universalist congregations are fully self-supporting, meaning that members and friends raise all funds for the operating budget, ministries, and programs of the church. We are ever grateful for your gifts of time, treasure, and talent. OCUUC amplifies that spirit of generosity by sharing half of the plate we receive with an organization that shares our values. This month, we are supporting Stand Up for Kids, whose mission is to end the cycle of youth homelessness. They do this every day in cities across America, one youth at a time. Their volunteers and staff are there to empower homeless and at-risk youth toward lifelong personal growth, and to create in those youth a sincere belief in themselves through open, straightforward counseling, mentoring, and life skills training. You can find out more about Stand Up for Kids through their website at standupforkids.org. Now, there are 3 ways in which you can give online. The first is through our website, www.ocuuc.org. The second, through an app called Give. If you can download it on your apps from your app store on your smartphone, and once set up, you can use it for any of your online giving, including your pledge. The third method is by texting 714-942-1131. Simply text to that number, and in the message, type the amount. As always, thank you for your generosity as the offering is given and received.
Everything more or less. Love is an unanswered question. Sometimes you have to guess. Love is a roaring lion that will never be bound. Love is a deep-rooted ruler for the people he lays on his crown. Like a memory, it finds you. Like a photograph, reminds you that you never, never have to be alone. Like a light in the darkness leads you, like a voice needs words and needs you, and like a map it always takes you home. Love is a powerful ocean where we can drown each day. Love is a beat and a rhythm we all have learned to sway. Love is the blood in our bodies, there's a reason why it's red. Love is a song in our heartbeats, it's a tune inside our heads. Like a memory, it finds you. Like a photograph, reminds you that you never, never have to be alone. Like a light in the darkness needs you, like a voice needs words and needs you, and like a map it always takes you home. Beautiful, powerful, strong enough to swallow this world, sweet and sour, a blooming flower, way more precious than a pearl. Like a memory, it finds you, like a photograph reminds you that you never, never have to be alone. It's more solid than a mountain, more liquid than a fountain. It stays with you no matter where you roam. And like a map, it always takes you home. 'Cause love is home. Love is home. Love is home.
Please join in singing We Gather Together, a song that puts our intentions into words and expresses our gratitude for the many gifts we share.
Gather together, we gather as one. Peace, love, and justice for everyone. We give from our
us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice and say together, oh, excuse me, sorry.
Now is a time when we honor the important events in our lives. You're invited, one and all, whether you are a member, friend, or visitor, to participate in our weekly ritual of joys and sorrows. Perhaps you came here today holding something close to your heart, moments from the last days or hours that have struck you at your core. If you'd like to honor such a profound joy or sorrow, you're invited to do so. You can do this by lighting a candle at home. It's a wonderful way to honor what you hold in your heart. If you would like to share your joy or sorrow with the congregation, as Beth, you can write it in the chat. Let's take a few moments in contemplation as Beth plays some music, and then I will begin reading the joys and sorrows out loud. Please forgive me if I miss a joy or sorrow. You can help me to not miss any by waiting to type comments to an expressed joy or sorrow until we are finished. We have a sorrow for Judith Stamper, whose father, Ross Robinson, passed away on Friday at the age of 91. Judith is glad that she was able to spend time with him and say goodbye, even though his nursing home has been locked down since March. Another sorrow, Sharon Ball has a great sorrow over the death of John Lewis. And she also has expressed a relief that RBG is doing well at home. And then we have kind thoughts coming from Karen Kennedy, who is sending good healing thoughts for Lisa Denk as she undergoes dental surgery this week. Linda Sperry has expressed a joy of gratitude for all the volunteer time the sanctuary campaign leaders are putting into the capital campaign relaunch and the many positive responses they are receiving from our members and friends. And I'm going to now look at the chat and see what I can add to the list that was sent ahead of time. First of all, happy birthday to Beth Syverson. And thank you, Maureen McConaughey, for saying it's a joy to have me back in the pulpit. I can tell you it's a joy for me to be there. And then Kate Cosman is celebrating the 90th birthday of her father, which was yesterday. Sarah Hunter has a joy. Her daughter and granddaughter are visiting them. So much fun, but exhausting. I miss my family, she tells us. Ken Arnold says, thankful for the lives of two great leaders. Whoops, they're jumping around on my screen. Two great leaders of the civil rights movement who passed this week. Sonny Harper says, hi, Katie, wherever you are. Peggy Priver says, so happy the noise and commotion from roofing is finally over. We're still waiting for the porta potty to be taken away. And Catherine T. has joy for a friend's daughter who was diagnosed with COVID-19 earlier this month and is now starting to improve and get better. Melody says she loved Taylor's song. Sarah Jones says, a joy, her guitar lessons finally paid off this week, watching the sunset from our balcony in Palm Springs. I serenaded my husband with some blues and Johnny Cash. And Susan Thomas says, honor and gratitude for the life of John Lewis and sorrow at his passing. May his memory be eternal. Peggy, thank you for thanking me, and a joy to very carefully visit Joel's parents in Arizona next week from Jo Lynn. She's also sending healing thoughts to her mom, Sharon, as she gets put back together from the surgeries in February. That happens on Monday, the 27th. They can't visit yet, so it is hard. And a candle of joy and appreciation. Dave Carlson points out that I had the honor of officiating when he and Katria were married 13 years ago last week. And believe me, I remember that day very well, Dave. Those are all the ones that I see. I certainly hope I didn't miss any, but you can all read the chat. And so let us hold in love all the joys and celebrations and all the hurts and sadness, both spoken and silent. Let our joys remind us to be thankful. Our concerns remind us to hope. And our sorrows remind us to connect. Let all these moments remind us that we are not alone.
Let us join together as we extinguish the flame of our chalice and say together, we extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. We are a congregation made up of people who all believe differently, and yet when we gather together, virtually or otherwise, we make up one loving community. We need not think alike to love alike. If you're a guest, a visitor, or someone who hasn't yet been known to us, I invite you to become a part of this beloved community. If even just for today, we encourage you to write in the chat your name and where you are from. If you'd like to know more about our church, please see our church website for the ways you can get involved and sign up for our weekly email called The Blast at blast@ocuuc.org. If you would like to know more about membership, please contact us at membership@ocuuc.org. Our community is enriched by its visitors, guests, and friends, and we hope that they find a spiritual home here. We want everyone to feel a part of this beloved community. So please reach out and we will help you get connected. After the benediction, we will have a short period where everyone can wave and say hello. Then those that remain will be put into Zoom breakout groups for 20 minutes or if you choose so. We invite you to check in and get to know the people in your group and welcome any visitors. So coming up this week, we have social hour on Friday at 5 p.m. Stitch Wits meet on Saturday at 10. There's a social justice movie night with the UU Fellowship of Laguna Beach that happens on Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. Then next Sunday is the Women's Circle at noon. And we'll be returning to the transgender inclusion video and discussion starting next Sunday at 12:15 p.m. All are invited. We encourage you to join us. Thank you.
And now let us sing together. Oh, sorry, Karen, your turn.
That's
I did it
okay.
too.
I chose some words by W.E.B. Du Bois for our closing words today because I thought they fit so well with what I was trying to say a few minutes ago. The prayer of our souls is a petition for persistence, not for the one good deed or single thought, but deed on deed and thought on thought, until day calling unto day shall make a life worth living. May it be so.
And now let us sing our goodbye song.
this service is over, let our service continue.